Hey folks, this is Kalani. One of the most anticipated features of patch 9.15 is the return of the Legion Mage Tower. It's kind of the only newish thing coming in this patch, and it just became available for testing for a very short period of time. In this video, we're going to go through how the return of the Mage Tower works, how it's shaping up so far, and what our first impressions are after the Mage Tower testing. First off, let's talk about how you can get into the Mage Tower. It works in more or less the same way as it did during Legion, except most of the restrictions seem to have been removed. So you need to pop down to the Broken Shore, that's located in the Broken Isles on the map if you didn't play during Legion, and the fastest way here would be to use a Dalaran Hearthstone or a portal to the Legion version of Dalaran. Once you're there, you should be able to fly down to the Broken Shore, easy peasy. The hub you're looking for is Deliverance Point in the southwest of the zone. When you get down here, run on over to the Mage Tower and talk to the Kirin Tor NPC there, and you should have an option to enter the challenge for your spec. And that's it. That's all there is to getting into the Mage Tower challenges. You don't need any items from Legion, you don't need your artifact, you didn't really even need to be playing during Legion to get this stuff done, and you don't need anything to buy your way in. Just talk to the NPC, that's all you gotta do. It's worth noting that the Mage Tower will only be available while the Legion Time Walking event is active, so if you can't see this NPC or no one's there to let you in, be sure to check the calendar and double check that Legion Time Walking is actually active, as that's the only time you'll be able to enter the Mage Tower again. There are 7 challenges or scenarios in total, and what challenge you will face will depend on the spec you are playing. I'll pop a quick table up on screen so you can see which fights you might be walking into depending on what classes you have, and you can pause it if you want to check that out. These challenges are going to be a bit different from what we saw in Legion, but not in a way you might expect. When you zone into your Mage Tower challenge, you will be scaled down, like with all other time walking events. For this event, you're going to get scaled down to level 45, and all of your gear will be scaled down to a lower item level as well. This scaling means that you can never outgear this content. Just getting a few extra item levels is not going to give you an edge in the Mage Tower like it did when these challenges were first present in Legion. That means that no matter how much time passes, the Mage Tower should stay quite difficult in general. It also means that you will not need to be level 60 to enter the Mage Tower on your ults, so as long as you're above level 45, you should be able to enter. Just remember that scaling tends to work kind of weirdly sometimes if you are not max level. This also means that you won't necessarily need to gear up your ults to be able to do Mage Tower on them and get all the skins and get that mount if that's what you're going for. Having an ult above level 45 with some decent gear will actually be all you need to do the Mage Tower. Now, just because you can't outgear it, it doesn't mean that you can't make your character as optimized as possible. Because your character is being scaled down instead of being given a template, like what some people thought would happen, you can do the exact same thing that the crazy time walking players do. You can build a time walking set. No matter what item you have equipped, it will scale down to the item level that's appropriate for time walking. That means you can get absolutely perfect stats, stack items with multiple gem slots, grab all the legendary gear from past expansions. All of that stuff could provide you with an extra edge in these Mage Towers, so it's a different kind of gearing up, but you can gear up for the Mage Tower challenges if you really want or need to. There are a few restrictions though. Going into the Mage Tower, you will not be able to use any Covenant abilities, any Covenant signature abilities, any Shadowlands legendary effects, any Soulbind traits or Soulbind conduits. Shards of Domination will be disabled, Azerite traits and essences from BFA will be disabled, as will the legendary rings from Warlords of Draenor and the legendary meta gems from Mists of Pandaria. So absolutely no bonuses from Shadowlands, which is definitely a bit weird and takes some getting used to, but that's most of the restrictions that we've seen so far. It is worth noting that they could change this at any time and disable any of these things as they see fit, so pay attention to the changes as we go forward. Now, with all that in mind, how hard are these challenges right now on the PTR? With the scaling in place, I think it's going to be a nightmare to balance properly, partly because these challenges weren't particularly well balanced when they first came out, and there's the continued problem of multiple specs sharing the same scenario, so where one spec might breeze through the challenge with almost no problems, another spec or class might struggle the entire time. From what I've tested, this hasn't really changed much, but I think it might actually be worse this time around. One of the first problems that is very much the same as back in the day is that different specs have different toolkits available to them. While a marksmanship hunter can tick all of the boxes for thwarting the twins quite easily, other specs might not be quite as fortunate and might struggle with parts of the challenge. You need a reliable interrupt, a reliable slow effect, some passive AoE damage, single target burst to take care of the hands, and high mobility or a pet to take care of the summoning runes. You gotta do all of that while still getting some damage in, and you're more or less constantly moving the entire time. You know, boomkins and shadow priests might struggle with that. It's not an easy thing to ask of some players, let alone some classes or specs. The other major problem that you might run into is the simple fact that these scenarios were not designed for our classes as they are right now. They were made for Legion class design in mind. Some classes don't have the same utility or survivability or even play in the same way as they did back in Legion. You also won't have the Legion artifacts or legendary gear that was so closely tied to class design for the Legion expansion, so some challenges can get a bit weird because some specs just don't have the tools they used in Legion to overcome the Mage Tower. In addition to those problems, some classes actually feel pretty terrible to play in the Mage Tower. With every temporary power from Shadowlands removed, some classes definitely feel a bit bare bones. It's really weird because without the Mage Tower and without this happening and this testing, I don't know if we would have been able to see just how poorly some classes play at max level without borrowed power propping them up. There's nothing else that has just stripped all that back and kind of given you Shadowlands class design as it is with nothing extra. For the most part, everyone is going to lose some utility, some survivability, that's expected, and a lot of burst damage during their cooldown windows. A lot of Covenant abilities are really tied to those bursty windows, and some specs will actually lose their cooldown window entirely. I dread to think how different a Venthia Boomkin is going to play when you strip all of that away. It also means you're going to have to learn to play your character without the Shadowlands bonuses if you really want to maximize your performance, which also means the classes and specs that rely on that borrowed power more might have the hardest time in the Mage Tower when it's stripped away. So it's definitely a mixed bag right now, and with everything that we just went over combined, the Mage Tower could prove to be incredibly frustrating for a lot of players. But even with those problems, the Mage Tower challenges can still be kind of fun. They get you to think outside of the box, they really do make you use all your spells and abilities, and sometimes in a way you might not have thought of before. We don't really see that kind of content in WoW, especially solo content. This was, and still is, the most difficult solo content that has ever existed in World of Warcraft, so I would expect it to be very hard. I just think the balancing is pretty off right now, and it is so important for the balancing to be done right this time. In some cases, one spec will have a harder time when compared to another, but in other cases, you just won't be able to complete the challenge because it hasn't been balanced properly. Either the monster damage is too high, or you don't have the same tools or self-sustain from the Legion expansion, or you rely too heavily on Shadowlands systems as a spec. It is a bit of a mess right now, which is really frustrating because this is why the public test realm is supposed to exist, to test these kinds of things and make sure when it goes live it's in a respectable state. But the Mage Tower was only put up for testing after the patch was marked for a release candidate, meaning pretty much no changes outside of quick changes, and the testing was only available for 1 day. It's no wonder that some specs smash through their challenges while others seemingly have no chance. It needed more testing. I am very interested to see how the wider player base takes to the Mage Tower, with the combination of it being quite difficult, the time walking scaling making it so you can't outgear it, and the balance problems cropping up for so many specs. I think it might end up being quite disappointing. Remember that this content is also only available during Legion time walking. The first time that comes up is in early December, and it will run for 2 weeks that first time. But after that, Legion time walking will only come around once every 18 weeks. That's only 2 times per year. You will have 2 chances per year to enter the Mage Tower, which is perhaps the worst part in this entire thing. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see all sorts of balance changes and tuning to happen when Legion time walking first comes around, and I think the dev team might even nerf the challenges quite significantly sometime in the future. When the Mage Tower was first available, it almost didn't matter if things were balanced properly because gear allowed you to make more mistakes. The more you could gear up, the easier the Mage Tower would become. That allowed the dev team to start these challenges off at the higher end because eventually most people would be able to clear them with enough gear. But if you don't allow that gear progression and you start these challenges off at the high end, they don't move anywhere. They stay incredibly difficult. And while that might be fun and engaging for the best players out there to really challenge themselves, it's not going to be very fun for the average Joe who can't juggle everything that they need to. These things are hard. There's no changing that. Gear kind of gave you that soft release of making it easier and more accessible in Legion, but we don't have that this time around. The only upside here is that you don't have any limits on attempts, so you can bash your head against this thing all day long until it clicks without having to worry about getting locked out or needing to farm a currency or whatever else. You can just keep going and going and going until you manage that perfect run. So while I think that the Mage Tower has some potential, and it's going to be very interesting to see how players take to it in December, I think the balance problems are too big to ignore right now. It's also a mighty shame that this content doesn't even go live with patch 915. We'll have to wait until December to give it a real shot on live servers. Just keep your eyes peeled for the inevitable nerfs to various scenarios before Legion time walking pops up. But that's our first impressions from the Mage Tower testing on the PTR and what we think so far. Did you do any Mage Tower testing while it was available? How did your runs go, and did you find any significant problems, or did you just breeze straight on through? How do you feel about the Mage Tower returning in general? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.